ragged breathing. Footsteps echo through the empty parking lot. The air is thick, heavy with tension. The dim glow of the streetlights casts long, eerie shadows on the rough concrete. Ethan Brooks steps backward slowly, every muscle in his body wound tight. Across from him, Carter Hayes stands with his arms crossed, a smug grin on his face. Behind him, three towering figures lurk like hungry wolves. "You really think you can run from me?" Carter taunts, his voice laced with amusement. Ethan doesn't answer. He inhales deeply, his dark brown eyes locked onto every movement in front of him. He's smaller than them, but he knows his speed, his skill, and his training are his edge. This fight was inevitable, and Ethan is ready. Florida, the peak of summer. The asphalt shimmers under the scorching heat, the air thick with humidity. At Ridgewood High, the first bell rings, signaling the start of a new school year. 17-year-old Ethan Brooks steps through the school gates, his worn-out backpack slung over one shoulder. He isn't looking for trouble. He just wants a fresh start. But blending in has never been easy. No one here knows Ethan's past. No one knows he was raised under the strict discipline of his grandfather, Master Kenji, a living legend in the martial arts world. Under his guidance, Ethan didn't just learn how to fight, he learned discipline, restraint, and a fundamental truth. Martial arts aren't for showing off, they're for survival. But some fights aren't about survival. Some fights are about proving a point, and Ethan is about to find himself in one, whether he likes it or not. On his first day, Ethan catches the attention of Carter Hayes, the Ridgewood basketball captain, golden boy, and most importantly, the school's undisputed top dog. Carter doesn't need a reason to hate someone, but when he sees Ethan walking through the halls without a trace of fear, without acknowledging his presence, he sees it as an insult. No one ignores Carter Hayes. Lunchroom, a chance encounter. Carter walks straight into Ethan, knocking his tray over, food splattering across Ethan's shirt. Ethan looks at him, just looks. Then he turns and walks away. No anger, no retaliation. But to Carter, that's the real insult. And Ethan doesn't realize it yet. But this is just the beginning. The locker room was thick with tension. The scent of sweat and metal lockers mixed with the chatter of students. But amid the noise, a strange silence formed. A space cleared as everyone turned to watch. Ethan leaned against a locker, his gaze locked onto Carter Hayes. The towering basketball captain stood before him, broad shoulders squared, a smirk playing at his lips. "You know the rules around here, don't you?" Carter's voice was low, his words sharp, cutting through the murmurs around them. Ethan didn't answer immediately. He knew Carter's type, guys who fed on fear, who needed to see submission in others. Instead, Ethan took a slow breath and replied, his voice steady, "I just want to be left alone." The room erupted in laughter, but not Carter. That calmness, he hated it. Carter didn't like being ignored. He took a step closer, then without warning shoved Ethan hard against the locker. Bang! The metal clanged loudly, but Ethan didn't flinch. "I didn't ask what you wanted," Carter growled. Ethan met his eyes, unshaken. "Then go ahead, hit me." His voice was quiet but firm. Carter clenched his fists. The guys around them grinned, waiting for the show to start. A lesson needed to be taught. Carter swung first, a straight punch, fast and powerful. But Ethan was faster. He tilted his head just enough to let the punch sail past. In a split second, he shifted his weight, sweeping his foot under Carter's stance. Thud! Carter crashed to the ground, caught completely off guard. The entire locker room froze. Derek Foster, Carter's best friend, stepped forward, eyes wide. What the hell just happened? Carter scrambled to his feet, his face burning with humiliation. No one had ever put him down like that. The disbelief in the room was thick, every stare making his blood boil. Ethan didn't move to attack. He didn't gloat. He just stood there, calm, as if nothing had happened. But he knew he had just broken Ridgewood's unspoken rule. He had disrupted the hierarchy. Carter wasn't going to let this go. Ethan wasn't afraid. But he knew one thing for sure. This was only the beginning. The sun dipped behind the western buildings, casting long shadows over Ridgewood High's empty parking lot. A warm Florida breeze swept through, carrying the thick, humid air of late summer. Ethan stepped out of the school building, his backpack slung lazily over one shoulder. He paid no attention to the eyes watching him from a distance. Then, a voice cut through the silence. "No one's here to save you now, kid." Ethan stopped. From the shadows, Carter and his three goons emerged, spreading out in a loose circle around him. "You think it's funny making me look like a fool in front of the whole school?" Carter's voice was tight with rage, his fists clenching hard. Ethan sighed. "I don't want to fight." "Well, I do." Carter lunged, his fist flying straight at Ethan's face. Ethan sidestepped smoothly. At that moment, Derek Foster, the biggest of Carter's crew, swung a baseball bat with full force. The air whistled as it cut through the space where Ethan had been just seconds before. But Ethan was faster. Lightning fast. He ducked, caught the bat mid-swing, twisted his body, and yanked hard. Derek lost his balance and slammed onto the concrete with a heavy thud. The other two charged. A punch from the left, Ethan ducked low, sweeping his leg in a sharp arc. The attacker crashed to the ground. The last one threw a desperate kick, but Ethan blocked it effortlessly. In one swift motion, he spun and delivered a powerful roundhouse kick straight to the guy's chest. Less than 2 minutes. Carter's crew lay sprawled out, groaning in pain. Ethan dusted off his shirt and turned to Carter. "Walk away. Just stop this." His voice was calm, almost pitying, but Carter's eyes burned with hatred. He knew he couldn't beat Ethan with strength alone, but he wasn't going to stop. The next morning, Ridgewood High exploded with gossip. The video from last night's fight had spread across social media like wildfire. "Did you see that kid? He took down Carter's whole crew in minutes. No way, Carter got wrecked. I still can't believe it." By noon, everyone was talking about the new kid who had humiliated Carter Hayes. As for Carter, he was suspended for 2 weeks. But his fury was far from over. Ethan, on the other hand, just wanted to stay out of trouble. He kept his head down, went to class, and focused on his assignments. But things weren't the same anymore. People stared, some with curiosity, some with admiration, some with fear. At lunch, Ethan sat alone, eating in silence. Then a voice broke through the noise. "Mind if I sit here?" Ethan looked up. Lena Martinez, a sharp-eyed Latina girl, her dark hair tied up in a ponytail. She sat down across from him, casually biting into her sandwich. "You don't seem like the type who likes to start fights," she said between bites. "I'm not." Lena leaned in slightly. Her tone turned serious. "Then you've got a problem." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Carter's not the kind of guy who just lets things go," she continued. "He and his friends, they're not done with you." Ethan didn't answer. "Look, I don't like Carter and his crew either," Lena admitted. "But I don't want to see you get caught up in his stupid revenge game." Left for the first time in days, Ethan felt like someone actually understood him. But deep down, he knew the truth. He couldn't avoid this fight forever. That night, Ethan stood in his grandfather's small home dojo, watching Master Kenji prepare tea. "I don't want to fight anymore," Ethan admitted. Master Kenji didn't look up. He poured the hot water slowly, the scent of green tea filling the air. "You wish to avoid violence?" he asked calmly. "Yes." His grandfather set the tea down, then met Ethan's gaze. His voice was low but firm. "Sometimes peace only comes when you're willing to fight for it." Ethan clenched his fists. He understood what his grandfather meant. If he wasn't ready to face this, things would only get worse. 2 weeks passed and Ridgewood High seemed peaceful again, but Ethan knew better. The storm had only calmed before the real chaos began. On the first day of Carter's return, he wasn't the humiliated loser anymore. He walked into school with a different aura, calm, collected, and far more dangerous. But the real threat wasn't Carter. It was the man walking beside him, Ryan "Rhino" Hayes, Carter's older cousin, a street fighter with a reputation. Ryan was built like a tank, towering, muscular, with the cold, calculating eyes of someone who had seen real violence. He wasn't just another schoolyard bully like Carter. He was a predator. The air was heavy with tension. The parking lot was empty, except for a handful of students watching from the shadows, their phones already recording. They knew something big was about to happen. Carter Hayes stood across from Ethan, fists clenched, his eyes burning with rage. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. This was about his pride. "You think you're better than me, Brooks?" Carter sneered, cracking his knuckles. Ethan didn't answer. His stance was steady, focused, ready. Carter lunged. A brutal right hook sliced through the air, but Ethan was faster. He dodged, pivoting just in time to avoid Carter's next swing. The crowd gasped. Carter wasn't used to missing. Snarling, he charged again, throwing a wild punch. Ethan sidestepped, fluid like water. With a sharp movement, he countered, a quick jab to Carter's ribs. Carter stumbled back, his breath hitching. Shock flashed in his eyes. But then his hand shot behind his back, a metallic glint. A low murmur rippled through the crowd. He had a bat. Carter gripped the bat tightly, his knuckles white. He was done playing fair. "You want to be the tough guy?" Carter growled. "Let's see how tough you really are." He swung. The bat whistled through the air, aimed straight for Ethan's ribs. Ethan had seconds to react. If he dodged wrong, he could break a bone. If he fought back with full force, he could seriously injure Carter, and that meant suspension. Maybe even worse. There was only one choice. Ethan dropped low just as the bat came crashing down. A sharp whoosh cut through the air. Using Carter's own momentum, Ethan grabbed his wrist, twisted, and in one fluid motion flipped him over. Wham! Carter hit the ground hard. The bat rolled away, clattering on the pavement. Silence. Carter gasped for breath, his body frozen in shock. He tried to push himself up, but he couldn't. The fight was over. Ethan stood over him, his expression calm, his breathing steady. "Stay down, Carter," he said softly, and this time Carter listened. The piercing sound of police sirens shattered the heavy silence of the parking lot. 2 patrol cars skidded to a stop, their red and blue lights flashing against the hot asphalt. The crowd scattered, their curious and fearful eyes darting around. A stern-looking officer stepped out, his hand resting on his holster. His sharp gaze scanned the scene, several students groaning on the ground, and Ethan standing among them. "Nobody move! Hands where I can see them!" Ethan let out a slow breath. He knew this wasn't going to end smoothly. The officers began questioning everyone. Carter, still aching from the fight, struggled to get up, but was quickly forced to stay seated. One officer turned to the crowd. "What happened here?" Silence, uneasy glances were exchanged. Then one student stepped forward. "I have a video." A girl raised her phone. It was Lena. The officer took the phone and played the recording. Everything was there. From Carter swinging the baseball bat to Ethan's precise but controlled counterattacks. The officer studied the footage, then turned back to Ethan. "You have the right to remain silent, but from what I see, you weren't the aggressor." Ethan said nothing. He knew he could have been arrested for fighting, but the evidence spoke for itself. After reviewing the situation, the police made their decision. Carter was expelled from Ridgewood High, permanently. His crew faced disciplinary action. Ethan was cleared but received a strict warning to avoid future violence. Carter stood there, his gaze fixed on the ground. No more rage, no more hatred, just emptiness. Ethan studied him for a long moment before speaking softly. "I never wanted it to end like this." Carter let out a dry, hollow chuckle. His voice was rough, almost defeated. "Yeah? Well, I never had a chance like you did." And with that, he turned and walked away. 2 weeks after the parking lot incident, Ridgewood High had returned to normal. The whispers about Ethan had faded. No more curious stares, no more cautious glances. Ethan walked down the hallway, his backpack slung casually over one shoulder. He was no longer the mysterious new kid. A few students nodded at him in acknowledgement. Some even looked at him with newfound respect. Ethan simply returned a small smile, unfazed. Lena caught up to him, holding 2 cans of soda. "Here, consider it a reward for surviving." She tossed one to Ethan. He popped it open, taking a refreshing sip. "Do you think Carter will be okay?" Lena sighed. "Who knows? But sometimes falling is the only way to learn how to stand back up." She shrugged. Ethan nodded, but he knew Carter wasn't the biggest lesson in all of this. What really mattered was how he had come to understand his own strength. That evening, Ethan returned to his grandfather's dojo. The room was quiet, save for the soft sound of wind slipping through the open windows. Master Kenji sat on the wooden floor, slowly sharpening a wooden practice sword. "Do you understand now?" His voice was calm, steady. Ethan placed his bag down and bowed his head in respect. "Yes, martial arts aren't about attacking, they're about protecting." Master Kenji nodded, a hint of pride flickering in his wise eyes. "True strength isn't in your fists, Ethan. It's in your ability to control them." Ethan clenched his fist, then slowly relaxed it. He finally understood. He no longer needed to prove himself through violence. True power was knowing when to fight and when to walk away. As the Florida sunset bathed the dojo in golden light, Ethan stood in the training yard, taking a deep breath. He began to train. His movements were slow, precise. No anger, no tension, just focus and calm. A figure of strength, yet at peace. Strength isn't about how hard you can hit. It's about knowing when not to.